It is my pleasure to welcome everyone today. Housekeeping. The washrooms are right over there. There are 2 exits this way, and there's through the kitchen. There's another very steep stairs, but there's an exit there. At the back of the room, we have some juice, some water, crackers, and cookies. They're all individually wrapped, so we're good that way. Is there anything else I should say in terms of housekeeping? Yes, this is being recorded live on YouTube.
Actually, I wasn't able to work out the YouTube live, but it will be on YouTube shortly after.
This is not being recorded live on YouTube, so there might be a chance of editing, so be yourself. So now to the good part. I get to introduce today's presenter, Stacey Love-Jolicoeur, the chairperson for the Bay of Quinte Pride and CEO of SAGA LGBTQ Education and Support Services. She is an independent mental health counselor and educator for the LGBTQ community. So the format will be an hour-long presentation and then Q&A afterwards. I was going to do more, but Stacey has that in her presentation.
Absolutely.
Is that okay?
Perfect.
Okay, so
Thank
now I
you
can
very
fade
much,
away.
Dan. Yep.
Masks are to your preference. If you're more comfortable having them on or not, forget that one.
Thank you very much, Dan. So welcome everybody and thank you.
Oh, thank you. Oh, no, that was for you.
No, that was for you. How awesome is that, eh? So as Dan was mentioning, you know, I do a lot of mental health work, and primarily most of my work is within corrections. I work in 13 prisons. So I'll tell you a little bit about that. Back in 2012, after my second surgery, I had difficulty finding a job. As a matter of fact, I couldn't find a job. And you know, I have 6 college diplomas and 2 university degrees. And I had constantly heard from HR professionals, you're not a good fit. Why? Because you don't like my 5 o'clock shadow, or you don't like my masculine sounding voice. They would never answer me, of course, for fear of discrimination. But what happened from that was I was desperate to find work. You know, we need money to live, right? So I found a job in Peterborough that was 2 hours a week. I drove from Belleville to Peterborough for a 2-hour-a-week job. So I drove for 3 hours to work for 2. But while I was there one day, my supervisor came to me and said, Stacey, we just got a call from one of our prisons, and they're looking for a mental health counselor to go and speak to a trans person. Would you go? I said, absolutely. It took 3 months to get my clearance, but once I got there and I met with that individual, he said, Stacey, it's not just me, there's lots of us, and we all need support. So we decided that we would put a proposal together to start a group. Well, we put that proposal together, we submitted it to the warden, and nothing happened for 3 months, and that offender took his life. The next month I got approved. Funny how that happens. But I started that group in that institution with 12 individuals. And what happened was a tsunami of amazement. Every prison across Canada was now on the phone saying, we have offenders, we want help. But there's only me, and there still is only me. So it became overwhelming. And then in 2020, when the pandemic hit us, I was working in 9 institutions and supporting about 200 offenders in these 9 institutions, but the phone was continuously ringing. And then it went silent. The pandemic hit us. And I had a couple reach out to me that had my private number and said, Stacey, everybody is screaming to speak with you. So I bought a 1-800 line. And I got it approved by Corrections Canada. So it's a national number available to any offender at no charge on any payphone in the institution. So that in December 2020, when I purchased that line, it goes to my cell phone. And I'm the one that answers that. I've had over 3,000 phone calls since December 2020. So it just really showed me that there was a need, right? With the ever-increasing number of offenders reaching out and institutions reaching out, I decided that I can't do this alone. So I created the not-for-profit agency, Saga, and I'm really, really happy about that. So Saga is an education and support services that we provide across Canada. I should have gone. Come on. There we go. Did I get it? Yeah, okay. And you can see there's a number of different things that we do. We do education and training, because one of the things that I found was it was great for me to go in and work with the offenders in the institutions. But the minute they walk out the interview room or wherever I was working with them, they get called a faggot, or a queer, or a weirdo, or something by a guard. So I realized that we need to do training to the staff, because it's pointless for me to go help somebody and the minute they walk out they get bigoted against. So that became my motto. And you know, when an institution would call and say, we have an offender, okay, that's great, I'd love to come, but before I do that, I need to train all your staff. So I created a training program for Corrections Canada, and it became a huge sensation within the walls. And every institution across Canada now has had the opportunity to work with me and be part of that. I've worked with Ann Kelly, who is the Chief Commissioner for Corrections Canada, for the last 5 years. And just last Tuesday, they rolled out what's called the CD 100, or the Commissioner's Directive 100. And it talks about gender affirmation and what the prison is supposed to do and what the prison can do, and really outlines a lot of the criteria that's required for people to identify within the walls. And it's a huge success. So I also do group facilitation and coordination. I do peer-to-peer support counseling. I created a reintegration program for offenders because I was working with this offender, and she's a sweetheart. So a trans girl, she had been in and out of jail 15 times in 5 years. So when I was sitting with her, I said, you know, her name was Chicky. I said, Chicky, what is going on? Let's talk about this. I need to understand this. Like, it doesn't make sense. You come to jail, you get released, then you're back in jail, right? So it came out that, you know, the prison does what they do. You know, parole does what parole does. They take care of good behavior, time served, have they completed their courses inside. They don't take a look at the person's mental health. They don't take a look at the person's identification. They don't take a look at ongoing mental health supports. Does this person even have a place to go to? Does this person have support of family or friends out on the outside? None of that was established or taken care of. So this one girl, she would get kicked out the door with whatever she had on when she got arrested. And she had no money, and her family disowned her because she was a serial criminal, or what they claimed serial criminal. And for her, it was, okay, what do I do? So where do I go? So she would rent a motel room, and then she would start turning tricks on the street, or prostituting herself out, for those who don't know what tricks are. And then she would get arrested. Or one time, she walked into a bar, and they asked her for identification. So she showed them the identification she had, and they said, that's not you. And she lost it. And the next thing you know, she's back inside in an assault charge, right? Because nothing was working for her, right? So I created a reintegration program where our agency looks at all of those things that parole does not look at. And we help them for 3 months before they get released. I've had 22 go through my program in the last 5 years, and 20 of them have not reoffended in over 5 years. This is unheard of, because the recidivism rate within the walls is about 80%. 80% of offenders will be back inside. So the success rate is not very good, right? So Corrections Canada has seen this as a huge opportunity to get free service. And you know, the phone was ringing off the hook, and the next thing you know, I'm working all over the place, and now I work from Atlantic Canada to British Columbia, 13 institutions, 7 halfway houses, and I have 350 clients. But I also have a board of directors, and I have field officers that are out in these locations reporting back to me so I don't have to physically do it myself, right? So we've been able to expand it wonderfully as well. So just a little about me. I'm 63 years old, and I first identified when I was 9. So 1967. You can't even imagine what it was like to be trans back then. As a matter of fact, my parents and the medical community and their church thought that I was mentally ill. And they put me in a conversion therapy program at the Clark Institute, which is a mental hospital in Toronto. I spent 3 years incarcerated there. And every day the doctors and the nurses said, "You're a boy, you're not a girl." And boys wear blue pajamas. And boys play with trucks. You're not allowed to touch a doll. You're not allowed to have a pink nightie. It didn't work. And when I was released, and I say released because I felt like I was in jail, my family never came to visit me in those 3 years. I was thrown back to my bigoted parents who had no conception of transgender and no desire to find out about it because of their astute Catholicism. And it was devastating. And I'll speak a little bit more about that later. But it became a passion of mine to find justice. So a little bit about today. We're going to do a little bit of history, gender versus sexuality, a little bit of terminology, understanding what gender binary is, examining our consciousness and our unconscious biases, and some best practices on how to support LGBT people, and why mental health of the LGBT people is important. And then finally, we'll have a little bit of a conclusion and some questions and answers at the end there, if you folks have any for us. So time for a little bit of inclusive education, so that you're prepared when you do meet somebody from the LGBT community, or you're working with them, or you're partners with them. But before we get into that, I want to set the stage. And confidentiality is important. I'm going to share a tremendous amount of personal details about me, and I'd like it to remain with you. And remember that the only thing that we have a right to is to share our own story. Okay?
Stacey, is there any point where you want me to stop recording?
No.
Or, okay.
No, you're welcome to go ahead.
Okay.
So we're going to watch a very short film here.
It's a global flashpoint for equal rights, born in a New York City bar. Take me back to 1969. What was this place like?
It was a dump. There was a burnt down bar that the mafia came in and painted everything black, opened up the doors, and made money.
The Stonewall Inn, like almost all underground bars that catered to gay clientele at the time, was run by organized crime. But the LGBTQ community in the late 60s had few other options. How important was this place to you and your friends back then?
Well, it was important because we could dance with each other. Remember, it was against the law to serve known homosexuals alcohol in New York City.
The last week of June 1969, an increasingly impatient NYPD raided the Stonewall multiple times. And on Friday, June 28th, its oppressed clientele, many transgender, minority, or poor, had enough. Did it feel like every other raid that you had experienced up until that point?
No, because the neighborhood cops always raided the bar, and they would walk in and say, "All right, girls, line up." And we'd line up as usual, but they came in nasty, hollering and pushing and shoving. And they hit somebody, and somebody hit back, and that started the whole thing.
At times, the Stonewall riots were actually lighthearted, but the underlying anger also sparked outbursts of violence. The officer who led the raid spoke to Today in 1994.
You must understand that these were kids who were out for a good time, and we spoiled it.
And then what happened when you came out here that night?
Well, after that, they broke the windows. We threw garbage cans through the window. We fought back. We shake police cars. We broke paddy wagon locks.
Police presence and LGBTQ resistance persisted for several nights, with dozens of arrests and injuries. The NYPD shut down the Stonewall Inn for good, but a movement was born, and the struggle for mere survival or acceptance pivoted into Gay Pride, held on the anniversary of the uprising. The building itself changed hands and businesses for decades, before its current owners stepped in with an eye on preserving history.
It wasn't being treated with the respect it should have been. This is where Pride began, so we had to bring it back to that status. We didn't want to make it a museum.
but we also wanted everyone to know the history.
That history is still being made. Stonewall has transformed into a mecca and a sanctuary. For mourning, like after the Pulse Massacre, and for celebration, like after the Supreme Court legalized gay marriage.
Yeah, to some degree, this has become, for the LGBTQ community, a kind of emotional ground zero, isn't it?
Absolutely. It really has become that symbol of gay rights around the world. We get visitors from everywhere you can think of. And I think when you talk about Stonewall, it resonates now because people are understanding exactly what happened here.
Tree, who was a customer at the Stonewall when the uprising happened, is now a bartender here and a living piece of its history.
I was very proud that I'm here. It's my second family, my home, and here.
In 2016, President Obama named the area outside the Stonewall a national park, the first to recognize the LGBTQ community. Pride is now a worldwide celebration, a community of millions of individuals, but its spiritual birthplace is this corner in New York's West Village.
This is a place where people can come to mourn. It's a place where people can come and rejoice. It's a safe haven for everybody. The straight allies also.
It's a piece of history. It's part of an education.
We don't take it lightly. We understand that we're the innkeepers of history, and that's a big responsibility.
In comparison to 1972, the first ever Toronto parade, and that wasn't really a parade of celebration, it was a parade of protest against the way that we were treated. I was 14, I was in this parade. As a matter of fact, you might see me. If you do, good luck. There was about 200 of us on the street.
We were yelling things like, we're here, we're queer, get used to it. When do we want it? Now! Well, in 1972, when I marched with a bullhorn at the front of the Gay Pride parade, I was 6 foot, I had long hair.
Those long-haired and radical.
That's right, those radicals. And there weren't very many people on the street because we were it. It wasn't like Gay Pride now where there's as many people watching as marching. It was just us.
It was fun because you had taken control of your life, which other people said you shouldn't have control of because you were sick or diseased. But we were saying, no, we're not. In fact, we're going to change the way society views us. And starting here, right now, starting here and now.
I did go to 52 Division, and the cop was a really nice guy. I mean, he was a very sweet guy, and he was deeply embarrassed at talking to us because he'd never heard of gay before. But finally, he looked me in the eye and he said, I just have to ask you, do you really believe in this cause? And I said, well, yeah, that's why we're having the parade. And he said, and you're really gonna march down the street saying that you're, you know? And I said, well, yeah, that's what we're gonna do.
I've seen lots of funny things in my time, but I've never.
In comparison to the last Toronto parade, 2019, 3.3 million people, including our Prime Minister. How amazing is that? From a couple of hundred in 1972. Just to bring that 1972 parade into context, I was 14 at the time. I got arrested because I wore a dress. I got charged with disturbing the peace because I wore a dress in that parade. And that police officer that Hugh was talking about arrested me because I had a dress on. And they called my parents to come and get me because I was a juvenile. I have a big family. I have 11 brothers and sisters. And we always had a station wagon. My dad came by himself, and it was the quietest ride I'd ever had in that car. You know, imagine 11 kids in a station wagon. It gets pretty noisy, right? But he said not a word. And he took me home, and he didn't even let me get in the house. He beat the living crap out of me at the back door. And he threw me through that back door. I got a scar on my forehead from it, and he told me to get out of his life. And I never saw him again. I lived on the streets in Toronto. I dumpster dove. I slept in underground parking lots because I had to. It was really, really a difficult time. But I was able to overcome that, and it became my passion to bring education and awareness about LGBT culture to people because of that. So, the pride flag, you can see it, it's all over this place today. And the mask some of us have as well. It's not just a pretty flag. And every color of the rainbow has a meaning. The flag, the rainbow flag, is an international recognized symbol of safety and security. If you want to attach yourself or you want somebody to open up to you, put that pride flag sticker up on your door, and you'll be amazed at the conversations that will become from that. Every color of the rainbow has a meaning. Red for life, orange for healing, yellow for sunlight, green for nature, blue for serenity, and the purple or the magenta is for our spirit. So when I see the rainbow flag, I see a beautiful flag, but I also see diversity. Because the meaning of those words speaks about everything that we are. It speaks about our body, our mind, our soul, and our spirit. The progressive flag, this one over here. A beautiful new flag that was created out of necessity in recognition and inclusion of people. The brown and the black stripe represent people of color and our brown-skinned people. And then the blue and the pink and the white is the transgender flag, like that one over there. And every color of that has a meaning as well. Anybody care to guess what the meaning of the color blue means? Think about it. What's the one thing that society says? Blue for? Blue for boys. Pink for girls. But what's that white stripe in there? That's for everybody else. Our gender non-conforming, gender variant, gender fluid, and there's a few other words that I'm not going to say in the presence of a church. But there is other words that they use. And that's for people who are not identifying as male or female, or somewhere in between, which is a large percentage of our youth. And they're trying things on. They're seeing how it feels. They want to see how the name David feels in comparison to Daniel, or how David feels in comparison to Lily, being the girl that they were. So it means a lot of opportunity for them to experiment and try things on. That's our gender non-conforming. And then we move into the part of the flag's not only a symbol of our hope and pride, it's also a symbol of our security and our struggles. And if you listen to the songs of that song that was playing when we were assembling here, Somewhere Over the Rainbow, that's the song from Judy Garland in 1939 for the Wizard of Oz movie. But the words of that clearly indicate hope and prosperity. And that's what we are about. And huge changes have been made by our governments in the last 5 years. Equal access to care, Bill C-16, anti-discriminatory bill, and now even doctors can prescribe hormones to their patients. Doctors can recommend their patients to surgery. When I wanted to get it, I had to apply to CAMH out of Toronto, and I had to wait 5 years to get in to see a psychologist, and that psychologist was the doctor that was running that conversion therapy program. Do you think he wanted to give me surgery? Absolutely not, right? It became a nightmare. But now today we are able to just go to our family practitioner and they're able to do that. And part of that change was, as a member of the LGBT community, I think the education portion is very, very important. And I approached Rainbow Health Ontario, which is kind of the governing body for doctors and nurses and nurse practitioners in our region that are dealing with people from the LGBT community. And we rewrote the manual, the protocols and guidelines for primary health care providers. I'm part of their advisory council, and I'm also a registered mentor for them. So this new document The old document was from the World Health Organization. It was 380 pages, and most doctors would not read 380 pages to take care of a patient. But this new document's 84 pages. They can sit down and read it over a cup of coffee. And it's very, very clear. We've really, really taken apart that 380 pages and condensed it down to the most important parts of it. And if you go on my website, which is transformquinte.ca, you can see that document. It's in the first tab under information. It's called Primary Protocols and Guidelines for Primary Healthcare Providers. And there's a section in there for feminizing, a section for masculizing, and then a section for our gender non-conforming. But it also shows the prescriptions, the hormones, the dosages, the costs, everything that you would need to know. Complications, yeah, everything that's in there. So a wonderful opportunity to get some real good information. So time for a little bit of trans awareness. And I must say that I am very, very proud to be a transgender person. What is gender? Gender is what's between our ears. And sex is what's between your legs. Now that's not even true either, because if you look at the word sex in a dictionary, it's a verb. It's a copulation of two people or one person for sexual gratification or procreation. That's what it is, right? It has nothing to do with our genitalia. Yes, our genitalia is used for sex, but that doesn't make us that person. So that's the difference. Biological sex is based on our physical attributes. So when the baby's born and the doctor sees a penis, he says, "Congratulations, Mom and Dad, you have a baby boy," based only on the genitalia. It has nothing to do with that person, that baby, that infant, that child. It's their assumption that that kid will be a male because it has a penis. Gender, on the other hand, is our concept of our identity and how we present ourselves and how we see ourselves in society. Any questions about the difference between gender and sexuality? No? Okay, good. The gender binary. This can get really complicated for people, but we know the binary is a straight line. And we see that down here at the bottom. And on one end we have the male spectrum, and on the other end we have the female spectrum. But we've come to learn that there's everything in between. Males typically use the pronouns a he, him, and his. And females use she, her, and hers. But what about all those other people? The LGBTQ2SAPP. What is that? I was doing a session to 15 kids, 12 years to 15 years of age. There was 15 of them. I had this slide up, and this little 12-year-old girl says to me, "Stacey, what does that LGBT all mean? And what if we forget somebody?" I said, "That's a really good question, Justine." I said, "What should we call it?" "Oh, no." I said, "Lesbian, gay, bisexual." She stopped me dead in my tracks. She said, "I know that. But what does it really mean? And what if we forget somebody?" So I said, "Okay, what should we call it?" And she said, "Well, in my circle of friends, we call it SAGA, S-A-G-A. Notice the first word on my brochure, SAGA, right? What does that mean? Sexuality and gender acceptance. And nobody's forgotten. It really made me realize the power of our youth and that I'm not too old to learn. So it became an opportunity, and I use that now as a registered agency. The Q. What is that Q? We've heard this word before, queer. A lot of people are uncomfortable to say that. So use the word questioning instead. You know what I was saying about our youth trying things on? They're questioning. They're trying it, right? We consider them to be the queer population because they haven't really decided what they want to do, right? So we use that. And most of those people use the pronouns of they, them, and theirs. Now that's difficult for people that understand because they're plurals. And if we use our English grammar, it doesn't make sense. But it does, really. Because every day, they feel like themselves. They don't feel like anybody else. They just feel like themselves. So when they identify themselves, they talk about them and their and they, because they are that. Well, how can one person be more than one? It's pretty simple. Some days they feel masculine, so that might be the David. Some days they feel feminine, that might be the Lily. But most days they just feel like themselves. Does that help you understand gender binary? Any questions? Okay.
I'd like to throw one at you.
Sorry?
I'd like to throw one at you.
Yes, please.
Just out of curiosity, somebody that likes wearing leather, and being in the butchy, but likes silk and all this female stuff in bed. What would be your idea of identity?
So that is an orientation, it's not an identity. Your orientation is your desire for your identity and what you do to make your identity align with you. So a leather or a bear, whatever avenue you're choosing, will be an identity that you're, an orientation. It's not really an identity, right? You're still either female or male or trans or not gender non-conforming, right? One is for sexuality and one is for gender, right? So the gay culture, gay is about sexuality and their sexual orientation. Gay is primarily men who identify with men, and lesbians are women who identify with women. So does that explain it to you? We can talk a little bit more about it after, okay?
That's a whole new content.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, what about that APP?
Never heard of that.
Any ideas? No? Who's ever heard of the word asexual? Right. How about the word polyamorous? How about the word polygamy? Because that is a lifestyle, right? So it can be whatever you want it to be. And that's why we'll sometimes see it 2S, LGBT, LGBT2S, LGBT plus, LGBT this or up. You know what I'm saying? So like there's lots of variations about this. Which one is correct? Whichever one you want to use, right? Okay? Understanding language. We're going to talk a little bit about language and definitions, not a whole lot because I could do a 3-hour lecture on it. And I'm not going to do that to you today. And as you can see on the board, there are many, many words in definition, and this is only a few of them. But there's some words up here that you're not going to understand. So I'm going to help you do that through this very, very short video.
The first things to do when attempting to be a better LGBTQ plus ally or working toward creating a more inviting and inclusive space is to educate oneself. It can be daunting to know how to do or how to behave when there's so much we don't know about a community. Thankfully, the internet has a plethora of information to help get you started. One of the best places to start when first learning about the LGBTQ plus community is to start with basic terminology. Note that definitions are always growing and changing with the community as cultural norms change. Also, not every member of the LGBTQ plus community personally identifies with the terms, so always trust the person you are interacting with to self-identify and go with the definition they are comfortable with if they choose to explain or describe their identity to you. Lesbian. Women who are primarily attracted romantically, erotically, and/or emotionally to other women. Gay. Experiencing attraction solely or primarily to some members of the same gender. It can be used to refer to men who are attracted to other men and women who are attracted to women. An umbrella term used to refer to the queer community as a whole or as an individual identity label for anyone who is not straight. Bisexual. A person who experiences attraction to some men and women. a person who experiences attraction to some people of their gender and another gender. Bisexual attraction does not have to be equally split or indicate a level of interest that is the same across the genders an individual may be attracted to. It can be shortened to bi and is often used interchangeably with pansexual. Asexual, experiencing little or no sexual attraction to others and/or a lack of interest in sexual relationships or behavior. Asexuality exists on a continuum, from people who experience no sexual attraction or have any desire for sex, to those who experience low levels or sexual attraction only under specific conditions. Many of these different places on the continuum have their own identity labels, such as demisexual, sometimes abbreviated to ACE. Transgender, a gender description for someone who is transitioned or is transitioning from living as one gender to another. An umbrella term for anyone whose sex assigned at birth and gender identity does not correspond in the expected way. For example, someone who was assigned male at birth but does not identify as a man. When it comes to gender, there are a few more definitions that might be helpful. Cisgender, a gender description for when someone's sex assigned at birth and gender identity correspond in the expected way. For example, someone who was assigned male at birth and identifies as a man. A simple way to think about it is if a person is not transgender, they are cisgender. The word cisgender can also be shortened to cis. Agender, a person with no or very little connection to the traditional system of gender, no personal alignment with the concepts of either man or woman, and/or someone who sees themselves as existing without gender. Sometimes called gender neutral, or genderless. Gender fluid, a gender identity best described as a dynamic mix of boy and girl. A person who is gender fluid may always feel like a mix of the two traditional genders, but may feel more man some days and more woman other days. And gender identity, the internal perception of one's gender and how they label themselves, based on how much they align or don't align with what they understand their options for gender to be. Often conflated or confused with biological sex or sex assigned at birth.
And the last definition that we're going to look at is 2S, Two-Spirit. What is Two-Spirit? It's an umbrella term that's used by the indigenous culture for anybody that is of an LGBT person and are participating in their community. And I'm indigenous, and it was explained to me many, many years ago by an elder that being Two-Spirit, we have the capacity to be a warrior or a provider on the male spectrum, but we also have that caring and nurturing of the female spectrum, hence the two spirits together. I hope that helps you understand what Two-Spirit is. I'm not afraid of my truth anymore, and I will not omit pieces to make anybody comfortable. For too long, our people were silenced. The Two-Spirit people of our indigenous communities, since the beginning of time, were here before our Western world infiltration on our lands. In the early 1600s, we were silenced by our tribes for fear of prosecution. We are valuable members in our community. We are seen as mentors and healers. And one of the most amazing gifts that we have is that we are also the sacred medicine carriers for our tribes. So we do have a very active role in our communities. Our one planet, our Mother Earth. And on her, we have 7 continents with 195 countries and 7.9 billion people. That's a tremendous amount of people. What does it take for that kind of population to coexist? It takes diversity. We've all heard that word, diversity. What is it? It's about being different. It's about being our individual self and valuing each other with respect, regardless of what their skin is, or their ideologies, or how smart they are, their talents, or even how old they are. That's diversity. Oh, sorry, I'm clicking away there and it didn't work. That's diversity. This might explain it a little bit easier.
Love has no age limit.
We are neighbors and best friends.
We all have different religions, but we have universal love as well.
I love my sister. Love is love.
Our family is no less than any other family.
So what was the purpose of that video? Anybody?
Well, the skeletal system has no visual gender.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
How-
So that people can love people for the person within, not for what the outside shows the world.
And it was right on the very last screen there, that love has no labels, right? That's the purpose of that video. To really show us that it doesn't matter, right? Did this video in any way show us anything about cultural diversity? Absolutely it did, right? It spoke about everything. It spoke about gender, and it spoke about those with disabilities, and it spoke about ageism, and it spoke about religion.
It showed a crowd of people accepting all of them.
Right, right. So what do you think was the main theme of that video? And you touched on it there, and so did you. That we're all the same inside. Could we tell what those skeletons were when we were seeing a skeleton? Absolutely not. We could not tell if they were male or female. We could not tell if they were Chinese or Americans or Negro. We could not tell if they were Catholics or Muslims or whatever faith they profess to be. We could not see if they had a disability. We're all the same inside. All we saw was a skeleton. When I teach at Queen's, and I teach 5 classes there as well as the Loyalist College. I teach at the Loyalist as well. But at Queen's, I teach the 4th year med students. And when I do this presentation and I show this video, even they can't tell. Because it takes a very trained eye to see which pelvis is male or female. And you have to know the anatomy and the bone structure completely, otherwise it just looks like a skeleton. And that's what we all see, is a skeleton. That skeleton means that we are the same inside. So be careful about how you look at people, because they're the same as you. They might look a little bit different on the outside, they might sound a little bit different, they might have different beliefs and everything. That's where your diversity kicks in, because it's okay for whatever they wish.
It certainly showed the surprise sometimes on some of the crowds, though, when they came to the sides of the curtains, when it was a girl, like the first one, you did see some like, oh.
Right.
And them talking, wow, those are 2 girls, like.
Because they were expecting male, female.
They were expecting male, female.
Right, that's the stigmas, and we're gonna talk about that, right? That society has placed upon the LGBT people. And that's why the revolution in 1969 was the start of the gay culture. It was well existing before that. It's just that we were suppressed and oppressed so much that nobody was allowed to talk about it. But enough of that. So why should it matter? Why should any of this matter? Well, it should matter because many from our community are denied jobs and promotions or accommodations based on who we are and what we are. And I've told you a little bit about my struggles with finding work because I'm trans. Because even today, many LGBT people are being murdered and beaten. And if you're part of the social media around the LGBT world, you hear about this on social media every day. Another person is found dead, or another person has been killed, or another person has been beaten or assaulted because of it, just for being who they are. And because of people's biases, we're made to feel uncomfortable when we show affection to our same-sex partners, if we have same-sex partners. Why is it okay for a husband and a wife to pull up to the train station and kiss each other goodbye, but it's not okay for 2 guys to do it, or 2 girls? It doesn't make sense. People should have the freedom to do what they want, within reason. Because LGBT materials are banned, and in many cases censored from many schools and school boards across the world. Things are changing, and the culture of that and acceptance with the LGBT world is changing. As a matter of fact, in a couple of weeks, I'm going to St. Paul's Catholic School here in Trenton to do this presentation to their staff.
That explains why they're not here.
Sorry?
They were all invited, so I think that explains why they're not here.
Maybe, right? But they reached out to me and asked me if I would come and be part of their professional development day. So that's even a bigger audience, right? So absolutely. Because our relationships remain unrecognized in hundreds of federal and state and territorial laws. And in some countries, they will actually kill you for being LGBT. They will take your head off if you profess to be a trans girl. They'll cut your head off. They'll shoot you in the back if you're gay, just because you are who you are. But the most important reason it should matter is because the LGBT community is disproportionately at risk of suicide. And suicidality is a big fear. It's also the most immense mental health struggle that the LGBT community has. Now think about that 7.9 billion people on our earth. In 2012, Transpulse News did a study, And what they learned was 10% of the population identified as LGBT. That's only the people that had the courage to identify. I think it's probably more around 23 to 25% of our population. So, but I'm going to use the 10%. So, 10% of 7.9 billion people, we're looking at 77% of those, so 600 million people will consider suicide next year because they're gay or bisexual or trans or lesbian. And of that huge number of 60 million, 45%, or about 270 million, will actually attempt suicide. And for the most part, it's because of rejection and unacceptance from our family, our friends, and people who think they're trying to help us, but they don't know the language, they don't know the culture, they don't know how to talk to us about our issues. So how can we best assist somebody in their journey? The most important thing that we need to do is do not make an assumption. When we saw those skeletons behind the screen, we didn't know, right? Did we make an assumption that that was a male and female in that first part when those two girls walked around? Absolutely we did, right? We have to be so careful of that, right? We don't know what somebody's orientation is based on their appearance. It's also important to remember that not everybody's straight or cis or heterosexual. Treat all people as individuals with respect, and that we have many roles and identity within our societies. Employ your effective communication skills. And remember that personal information that people share with you is confidential. Try to use neutral terms, especially if you're doing forums or something like that. Husband and wife, or partner or parent, right? We need to be so careful of our language, especially with our youth population. Think about this. We have 600,000 children in care, or what they call part of the ward in Canada. That's huge numbers, right? So at some point, I'm hopeful that those children will find homes. Are those people that are adopting those children the parents? No, they're not. They're the caregivers, right? We ask that child, tell me about your parents. They don't know who the parents are. What does that do? It causes a spiral of depression. It causes suicidality. It causes all kinds of mental health issues. So be super careful on the words that you ask the child, right? Be honest with people. If you don't know what you're talking about, or you don't know what they're talking about, let them know that. And tell them that you're trying to figure this out and understand it, so please help me with that. But also remember, it's not their job to educate you. It's your job to find out about it, become educated, but it's not their job to educate you. Tell them you're working to understand that, and there's some areas you're still working on. And most of them will be glad to help you or direct you in the right path to find out that information. If you're unsure of somebody's gender identity, ask them a simple question. How would you like me to identify you? How would you like me to speak of you when I talk to others? They'll tell you how they want you to talk about them. They'll tell you what they want other people to hear about them. Create a welcoming environment. Post inclusive posters or pride flag stickers or symbols that represent inclusivity. Because as I explained, the pride symbol is an international recognized symbol of safety and security. So when you have that on your door or on your car or on your office or on your bulletin board, people see that. And it doesn't matter where or who they are, if they're coming from other worlds, that is an international recognized symbol. And just a little bit of history on that. that 1939 song from Judy Garland, Somewhere Over the Rainbow, is the reason it was adapted for the LGBT community, because of the way that we were treated and the behaviors that we experienced from society and governments against us. So that was the hope and prosperity. Reflect on your own practices. Do you advocate for LGBT people in your workforce, in your churches, in your communities? Do you challenge homophobic and heterosexual remarks, whether it be from a coworker or a family friend? I'll share a little story. As the coordinator for the Transform group, which is a transgender group that we run in Belleville, I've been the coordinator, facilitator of that group for 10 years. When I started doing that, I decided that I needed to create a safe place for people. So in order to create a safe place, I do an intake of people that want to come to group. I got a phone call one day from a mom who said, "Hi, Stacey, I was given your number. My kid thinks he's a girl." That's what Mom said to me. Immediately, I knew that I was up for a struggle just by the way she said that, right? Because she didn't believe it, and I could tell that. So I went to her house, and I'm sitting in the kitchen with Mom and this beautiful little girl, and I hear the rumble of the Harley in the driveway. Now I know that sound because I ride a motorcycle too. In walks Dad, a great big burly biker boy, full beard, really dirty. Looks at me, looks at his kid, says, "Oh, what do we got here, a fag convention?" So I stood up in his face. I said, "John, you and I need to go in the other room and have a talk." Within 5 minutes, this great big burly tough boy was bawling his eyes out. Why? I said to him, "John, you keep up with the attitude you have, you're going to put your kid in the ground." And that's when he lost it. It came out in conversation that John works in an all-male facility, a steel mill, okay? And every day they bash. They call it flavor of the day. They bash the gays, they bash the lesbians, they bash the Chinese, they bash the churchgoers, they bash. The flavor of the day. And I said to John, you need to stop it. You need to stop it right now. In yourself, in your workplace, and in your home. Because you're going to put that kid in the ground because of it. Your attitude is killing your child. About 3 weeks after that conversation with John, I got a call from the CEO of that company and said, "Stacey, John gave me your number. He said that he had a talk with you. What the hell did you say to them?" I said, "I didn't talk to them, I talked to John." He said, "Okay, whatever." He said, "But what did you say?" And I said, "Why, is there a problem?" He said, "No problem at all." He says, "My production is up 35%. And these guys are working like they love each other. Like, what did you say to him?" And all I did was take away that negativity that he brought home every day with him. And that changed the dynamics in that workplace, and their production went up by 35%. Understand how heterosexualism and whatnot in our workplaces can be devastating, or whether it be from fellow workers or colleagues or family members. We need to shut it down. We need to shut it down as fast as it comes out. Okay? If somebody discloses to you that they're gay or lesbian or trans, tell them it's okay. Tell them it's okay, and thank you for sharing that information. I can only imagine how difficult that was for you. Because that point of them coming out, and that's what they're doing when they disclose, they're coming out, they risk losing you as a friend or a family member or a parent. And that's all it takes is I'm gay. Like, for instance, my family. I lost my family because I became the girl that I am. As a person from the LGBT community, what are some of the things that you worry about? Open that conversation with them. Allow them to tell you what their feelings are. Not what you're feeling, because it's not for you, it's for them, right? What kinds of supports do you think you need? Not what kinds of supports can I give you? You don't know. You're not trans. You're not gay. You're not lesbian. Ask them what they need. Give them the opportunity to tell you what they need, and then you can help them find that. And as I said earlier, mental health is a very, very important part of that. And we run the risk of mental health causing suicidality because most LGBT people are in the closet. You're going to see this, if you come to the parade on June the 11th, you'll see this closet. I built it. It's going to be on the stage and people can get their pictures taken with it. Because nobody deserves to be locked in a closet. The last little short video.
We all have mental health. It is just as important as physical health. It is not only about mental illness or mental disorders. This is just one part of a bigger picture. It's best to think about mental health as being on a continuum, rather than people being either mentally ill or mentally well. We are all on the continuum, and we move up and down according to factors such as our genetic makeup and upbringing, our life circumstances, and the stresses we are under. At one end of the continuum, we have mental disorders, like depression or anxiety. And at the other end, we have states of positive mental health, when we're thriving, content, and fulfilled. The aim of mental health interventions is to move people up the continuum, so that they're able to reach their full potential and live satisfying lives. The World Health Organization describes mental health as a state of well-being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. Being mentally healthy means being resilient and able to cope with difficult times, feeling in control, being confident, feeling good about yourself, managing and expressing your emotions, building and maintaining good relationships. We all experience periods when we feel stressed, worried, anxious, sad, afraid, or angry. These are all normal emotions. However, when these emotions become severe enough that it interferes with the person's ability to function daily, and these feelings become persistent over time, then it can develop into a mental health problem. There are many different types of mental disorders. When left untreated, mental disorders can be chronic and long-lasting, and are associated with increased disability. They significantly have an impact on daily functioning and frequently interfere with family, social, and work responsibilities. Fortunately, there are effective treatments and evidence-based interventions available that aim to help individuals understand and cope with symptoms of mental illness. However, very few people with mental disorders access existing treatment services. This may be due to barriers such as the stigma attached to seeking help, the lack of understanding of mental health problems, uncertainty of how to get help, or the fear of disclosing mental health problems. Research shows that stigma remains one of the biggest factors preventing people from seeking help early for their mental health problems and getting the appropriate support they need. It is important to acknowledge that we all have mental health and have a personal responsibility to learn how we can improve and maintain our well-being in order to lead meaningful and satisfying lives.
So the LGBT people only ask for a community that reflects our own values and ethics and treats all people with dignity and respect. It's really not that difficult. We expect the same behaviors that you expect from normal people or people of society that are considered to be normal. And that's treat every person with respect and fairness, value diversity, and the benefits of combining the unique qualities of each and every person. Helping to create and maintain safe environments and healthy environments for people. That's why I was really touched when I was asked to come here and be part of the LGBT exploratory committee. What a wonderful idea And I really, really hope that that can be grown and developed within your organization here and spread throughout other United Churches. Many of the United Churches are becoming affirmed congregations, which means they get the training to understand, just like you are here, and it becomes a wonderful opportunity for the congregation to come together as a community. And working together in the spirit of openness and open, honest, transparent conversations about what we're doing and how we're achieving that. Mental health is important to everybody, not only the LGBT people. And I like to consider that our mental health is a journey, not a destination, because we're continuously on that journey, learning new words, learning new ways. And we know that mental health affects us. It affects each and every person, even in here. We all struggle with mental health. It's not the information, it's what we do with it. Whether or not we choose to let it affect us or whether we choose to deal with it. So that's the difference. And the issues that affect the LGBT community, I could probably write 10 lists like this. But this really kind of brings it together, the stigma of being LGBT. As you saw in those videos, since 1969, LGBT, before that, even the police departments thought we were nuts, thought we were crazy, thought we were criminals, thought we were like sexual predators. Homophobia and transphobia, hatred, bigotry, ostracization, suicidality, being Native or Two-Spirit, right? Mental health issues, they're rampant. And because of lack of employment opportunities, lack of trans competent medical care, lack of LGBT competent medical care, not just trans, but LGBT, misgendering, ignorance, lack of understanding, and lack of acceptance. That pretty much wraps up my presentation, and that is the end. But I really hope for you that it's really kind of just the beginning. And I want you to know that knowledge is having the right answers, but intelligence is asking the right question. And with that being said, I want to thank you all for being here. You're all welcome to take down my information or get a brochure off the table there. And we're going to open the floor to questions.